Said, I was born into a highly destructive, satanic cult. I need not mention it by name, although I'm sure plenty of people can figure it out, as I am a survivor, and I will tag this as such, of modern mind control programming, offshoot of Project MKUltra, the government mind control project that was so infamous when it became known, I think around the 1970s. And on the surface, I won't say everything looked fine, but perhaps it did to an untrained eye. I was a highly intelligent child with academic parents. Both my parents have doctorate degrees. My father is an academic and a professional. My mother is a musician and a teacher. And I grew up in an extremely fancy, ostentatious, beautiful home in a secluded area in the southern United States, where no one could see or hear what was going on outside of that house. And, well, atrocities, terrible things were committed in my home, in my parents' home. The worst horrors were committed in the trafficking ring that I was taken to on a near nightly basis, and sometimes for actual long periods of time. I was born in 1996. I'm 21 years old. Until I was 17, as I said, I was a fully enslaved member of the cult, and I was used in various different ways, including in child sex trafficking, in other horrendous forms of child trafficking. I was forced into snuff films. It's probably the worst thing, in addition to being sexually abused by both of my parents and used as a sex slave by them from birth. I was tortured. I was forced to kill. I was brainwashed through monarch programming. I don't need to go into more details than that about the tortures, but anyone who wishes to look up information on that online, you can find plenty of information about all the horrible things that people have gone through in the Monarch Project and in MKUltra. So difficult to speak about this. I've seen thousands of people die, namely children. I've been raped probably hundreds of thousands of times, tortured continuously for years on end. And during this time, I had little to no awareness of what was going on. I would go to school, I would come home, I would be ritually abused, I would be trafficked, I would be raped. I would wake up the next day, and I would not know what had happened to me. I did not know why I was so exhausted all the time as if I never slept. Why, or even that, my eyes were dull. My pupils were pinned out from opiates I did not know I was being given, or they were greatly dilated from amphetamines I did not know that I was being given, or psychedelic drugs that I had no awareness that I had been given or that I had even experienced. Many people have a hard time believing that child snuff exists, that even snuff exists, then let alone that high-ranking government officials and military agencies orchestrate it. To believe that there are deep underground military bases that commit mass genocide against children, film it, and sell it on the black market for quote-unquote gore whores, snuff fiends, slop sluts, snuff kings. To watch it is unfathomable to most people. Unfortunately, that is reality, and that is a reality I know too well. I spent the first 17 years of my life being taken to that place on a near daily basis, sometimes held for longer periods of time, in which I was incarcerated, did not know if I would ever see daylight again. I've witnessed thousands of murders, largely of children of color, who were systematically targeted for their race by the white supremacist government, which runs the United States. They called it Uncle Sam's Snuff Factory as a private joke, as if it was a mom and pop shop, a local business. Uncle Sam was supposed to be a friendly figure, a figure in American propaganda you're supposed to look at like a father, like a friend. The Snuff Factory, also known as the Genocide Factory, is the very literal definition of hell on earth. It is not unique. There are other places like it all over the world. I have been trafficked there as well. But what I can say is there is no place like Uncle Sam's. It is one of those places where a person can get literally anything they want for the right price if they have the connections to be there. I have seen wealthy, aristocratic white women ordering children of color on menus to be delivered dead, cooked on platters in a wing of the place they called it Cannibal's Kitchen. And the reason I'm alive and the reason I survived is because I was born into an organized crime family involved with the CIA who ran this operation. And I had the genetics, the family background to be a candidate for perpetration, for continuing the cycle of violence, from being one of the quote-unquote leaders or members of the group involved. So I was kept alive for experimentation, for slavery, for use. We're talking about children cut apart, fed to other children for people's sexual gratification. And most don't want to look at it, and I do not blame you. I do not blame the survivors of this abuse who stay dissociated, who remain used and enslaved because they cannot look either, because they cannot come to terms with their experiences. And I do not blame the general public who will not look. But this is reality. And all I ask of those who watch this is that you remember that while it may be excruciatingly painful for you to look at this reality, to think about this being possible, there are children. I ask you to remember and acknowledge that there are children who are surviving it every day. Around the time I was 18, I became aware that I had dissociative identity disorder. I became aware that I had been programmed, and then I became aware that I had been programmed in Project Monarch and MK Ultra. Now, there's a lot of disbelief in this culture. There's a lot of disbelief all over the world, I'm sure, but American culture is definitely a denial culture, and it can be very, very hard for ritual abuse survivors to speak out and be received by the general public. Harassment from cult members, as well as from ignorant people in the general public, can be devastating to survivors who have already been through so much. And upon finally breaking free and entering the outside world, to find that this quote-unquote outside world, that this duality of the terrible, terrible inside and this mysterious or even magical outside world is actually false, that people are people, and people perpetrated this, and people exist on the outside. Having that duality dissolve can be extremely traumatizing. And so sharing this stuff to the general public, knowing the ways in which I'll likely be received, is difficult. And to those of you who've been through these things, who are hearing this now, who are watching this now, you know that you are not alone. There are other survivors who have spoken out, and I believe that every survivor who speaks out has a unique perspective to offer. I believe that while I am by no means the only person who is speaking out and has spoken out, that I add something new to the tapestry of survivor voices in this world, and that someone will find my unique perspective that enables them to break free, just like I have found some unique perspectives that have been the perspectives that have largely enabled me to break free. But there are people like me, and no, I'm not asking for myself, but for everyone. There are people like me who have survived these things who need help. They need therapists, we need doctors, we need lawyers, we need support, we need friends. We need new family because most of us have lost ours. And if you can be that for somebody, you can help the collective damage created by these rings. And hopefully one day that collective spirit will be strong enough to take this stuff out at its source, to go down into the trenches and actually rescue the majority of the children in child trafficking who never make it out. Thank you.